agreeing to speak today, Jose. We're really interested in finding out in a kind of deeper way what radical organizations are about and what's motivating you. So it would help everybody if we got a bit of your backstory of what led you to want to investigate and form and, you might say, revolutionize organizations.
Well, thank you, David, for inviting me. My history is a little odd in that I was born in Portugal, immigrated to the United States as a child, and started, I think due to my immigration, started to be an entrepreneur really early on. By the way, David, I'm not seeing myself on the screen still, so not sure if that's what everybody else sees.
Thumbs up if you see. Can you see him, Monica?
I can see him, but in the speaker view, if I use the gallery view, it doesn't work.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure because I've got him in gallery, in a speaker.
Okay, I'm okay with it. It's just not sure that it's doing
It'll
what you
record
want it to
with
do.
you on speaker.
Okay.
So
can
you had an
manifest that.
unusual entrepreneur, you had an immigration experience moving to the States, and you already in the beginning, you were feeling the impulse to be an entrepreneur. That's what I was hearing.
Yeah, I was, the reason that I mentioned that is because I've always been creative. Miriam was talking about architecture and the study of architecture and so forth. That was my love. At 9 years old, I decided I wanted to be an architect. By 16, I started a drafting business. I was drawing on evenings and in weekends for architects and engineers. I'd called them up and said, hey, I can do drafting. And so I was doing details. And that quickly got me involved in work, quickly got me involved in doing startups. I did my second startup when I was 21, my third startup when I was 27. And that's when the one that got acquired. And when that one got acquired, I got involved in the first time in my life in a corporate environment. And that's where I learned everything that you shouldn't do about work. That was sort of like, I could not understand why people did things that they did in a corporate environment, looking from the outside in, historically, for me. And then I found myself doing those things and behaving those ways, making those decisions. By the time I left, I was the VP responsible for digitizing 250 newspapers across Canada. And that work had been very difficult. I failed miserably, as did most every other traditional media company. But it was the lesson of how I changed that really stuck with me, because I'd become someone I didn't recognize. On a flight back from Edmonton, Alberta, where I had just laid off somebody. I'd flown in the night before. I'd laid off a team of people. And then right after I laid them off, I jumped on a flight. I would typically be able to spend time with them and explain what happened and why it happened and support them, both with whatever I could do for them, but also emotionally. I wasn't able to do that. I had to jump on the flight and fly off to another city to go do another round of layoffs with some other folks. And I broke up into tears on the flight. I just couldn't like figure out why the hell am I doing this? What made me even get to this point? Why am I the guy that does this? And I had asked my boss a number of times, like, why me? And the answer was always, you're so good at it. Right. And the good at it was sort of the stroke in the back and the stab in the heart all at the same time, right? And so on that flight, I thought, that's it, I quit. I quit the industry. I quit this job. I can't do this anymore. This is not right. Something's wrong here. In short order, my father died. I separated from my wife. My mother had a stroke. I moved back to Portugal to support my mother for a year, and realized that's who I was that person that was helping my mother, not the work that I'd been doing. So I came back to the Bay Area. I'd lived in Canada for 25 years, came back to the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and started the research of trying to understand why. And it wasn't why work needs to be different or why organizations need to be different. What happened to me? Why did I do those things? I just thought that the company I worked for was a bad company. I didn't think that it was a systemic issue. It was just these people were a bunch of bad people that made me do these things. And then I came to the realization that I had done what all of my colleagues had done, which was succumb to the environment that I was in. And that's really where it all started. I'll leave it there, David, because then otherwise I won't give you a chance to ask any questions.
Okay, well, appreciate you curtailing a little bit of your life story, but I think we're going to go deeper into it anyway, because one of the points you made is that looking out from the outside in, you couldn't understand why people behaved in a way. And yet when you were in, you behaved identically or as illogically when you were in. So I'm wondering if you can explain your insight into that dynamic for everybody.
Well, I think, again, I'm going to point to Miriam. Miriam, you're in the middle of my screen, and you're also the person that I'm going to keep referring to, because what you said about Christopher Alexander and the work that he did about life. We are interdependent. And when we're in an environment where we are interdependent with that community of people, whatever context that community has, that's the context that you're driven by. And so living in an environment where you are surrounded by the mentality of driving certain behaviors, driving business, driving success in that way, then you end up reacting to that, because we aren't so independent that we can actually make decisions that are completely absent of that influence. And there's a perception that we can. We say, oh, you're strong, you can make decisions outside of the context that you're in, but we're not. Right? There's some subtle areas that we can and some subtle areas that we do, but for the most part, we are a part of that context. And so when you get yourself into a context and you do not see that context is what it is, in this case, our way of working is bound to this concept of force. Everything is about how do we compel someone to do something. We do that as investors in the executive class. The executives do it in the middle management. The middle management does it to the staff. The staff does it to the clients, right? In the case of media, we do it to the audience. It's always this concept of, and we don't think of it that way. We think we're just doing what needs to be done. We're doing the way that the world works. In reality, the way the world works is through force. And that's been the understanding that most reflected on me. It wasn't just understanding who I am and how I behave, but that the context that I'm in creates the who that I am in the behavior that I do in that context. And when we don't see that environment as an environment that is one of force, one that doesn't have to be that way, but is that way, then we don't see it for something that is altering our behavior against our nature, thus the stress, thus the upheaval, thus the struggle. You know, in those days, I was thinking, I'm just not strong enough to be a VP. I'm just not good enough to be doing these things. All these other people would be able to do this job, and I'm not able to do it and survive it without the emotional and stress and everything else, because I'm not good enough. So we internalize this confrontation between our purpose and our environment of force as our failure, not the failure of the environment. And so that has been what Radical is about.
That's you know, a fascinating distinction, and I think that there's a kind of what you describe as the context is a set of agreements on how organizations or corporates are run, and those are often unquestioned and involve coercion, compulsion, and what's the word, compliance is another favorite word in that domain. So what's the alternative? What is it that what's the force or the energy that you're working with that isn't force then? What is it that you've turned to that you feel offers a healthier perspective?
Well, maybe before answering that question, the thing that we need to understand is that with force comes counterforce.
Okay, yeah.
Right. And so, and that's a fundamental of physics. You cannot have force act on something else without that something else offering a counterforce. And so when we talk about a new way of doing it, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, let's motivate people to change. And then we're back into the force of motivating people to change. And so a lot of the work, you know, Donna earlier talked about this space of transformation of work. And many of my colleagues, and myself included, initially started with this idea that what we can do is we can compel people to do something different. We'll get, you know, the founders of these organizations, the leadership of these organizations to change how they do things. And it's just another instance of force. And when we do that, it keeps us in that force mindset.
Right.
So the way to do it, to answer your question, I believe, is that we can't actually meet force head on. What we have to do is step back from force and recognize that we have our own radical purpose. And it is that radical purpose as individuals, as a collective, that is suffering. And that radical purpose, I don't think of as a human purpose, but a purpose of life as a whole. Back to Christopher and the fact that it is life that we are a part of. We are a piece of life, each and every one of us. And so for us to recognize that we can't live in a place of force anymore, that the only way that we can live is in a place of connecting to who we are. And that requires a lens change. We have to change a lens about who we are. And so the term radical is to describe that fundamental change, that change in lens from one of being driven by this external force and waiting for that force to act upon us for us to then behave. Most people today, I would argue, if you said, well, what if you didn't have to work? The first thing they're come out of their mouths would be, well, I wouldn't, which is absolutely untrue. But force is so prevalent that we can't see ourselves as doing work absent the need to work. right? This forceful need to work. Oh, if I didn't have work, I wouldn't have a home, I wouldn't have money, I wouldn't blah, blah, blah. That's the first thing that we would think. And if somebody says, well, you don't have to, then we would say, well, then I wouldn't, which is contrary to our nature. Our nature is to be creative, to create, to improve life, to always be making change. And so radical in the sense that it is a fundamental change in our view of the world and our view of ourselves. But the other part of radical is a second meaning of radical, which is actually its most oldest meaning, which is root. At the foundation of life is where purpose exists. And our purpose as individuals is to express our piece of that purpose of life. And so when we tap that, then we can reorganize from that radical purpose and evaluate our environments of organizations from understanding that that purpose is what drives our behavior, and that we can build environments and processes that are force-free, or at least much reduced in force. And hopefully over time learn to live in the force-free environments. Today, we don't know how to do that.
That's a gorgeous vision, and I love to hear that vision of the world shared. I think there's never enough of that sort of vision shared. You can't do enough of it. But I have a slightly critical question, not because I don't believe or don't agree with what you're saying.
Bring it on, David. Bring it on.
Okay, good. Okay, so you could say, or what I'm hearing is what you're relating as this power or agency or purpose that somebody has as being intrinsically good and only wanting to be bettering the world. Isn't that overly simplistic or idealistic in terms of what you think the deeper motivations are? What convinces you that was at the root of the human is to do good in the world? I believe it, but I would like to hear you push me back on that.
I won't push back.
Okay.
I won't push back because I don't believe in good and bad.
Okay.
Okay. There is actions that impact people negatively, that impact life negatively. And there are actions that impact life positively. They're neither good nor bad. They are what they are in that the impact that they make is obvious when you see it, when you feel it. The question is, are we predisposed to make those impacts on people in a way that serves life? And yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
But are we also capable of doing damage to life? And the answer is yes. The question is not whether we're capable of one or the other. The question is whether we can be in environments that create the impulse to serve life.
Okay.
If we're in an environment where we have no food and we are threatened, then we will behave in a way that does not serve life. We might hurt others, we might hurt ourselves, we might hurt nature in general, and we do. That's the interdependence piece.
Yeah.
If we look at it as black and white outside of the interdependence piece, then we start to look at things as, well, there's only good or there's only bad. And there isn't. There's both. It's the creation of an environment that interdependently supports me so that I don't feel the need to do those things.
Yeah.
Then I won't. So it's for us to create that environment. It isn't an innate thing that I'm going to be good. The only thing that's innate is if the environment is supportive of me, I will be good.
Okay, that's a great response, and I think some interesting distinctions you're making there. And I'm kind of curious about, this is kind of very primal, unformed and new kind of discovery, as it were. How do you help founders and people starting up uncover this, get rid of what's getting in the way? What is it that you do or bring to people that enables them to sense and feel this calling to serve life?
They do feel it.
Yeah.
They just don't know it.
Yeah.
They just don't know what it is. So
Okay.
it's a matter of that lens that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
What you're feeling when you walk down the street and you see somebody poor living on the sidewalk, and that gives you that feeling, that anxiety, that sense of something's not right, but I know I can't do anything about it. That's life talking to you.
Yeah.
You feel it. When you can't let go of your colleague that you're supposed to fire, and you feel like you can't do it, and you don't sleep for a week beforehand, and you end up doing it, and you are being torn up inside as you're doing it, that's life speaking to you. Okay. When you as a soldier come home and are altered for the rest of your life by the acts of violence that you saw and did, that's life speaking to you. Yeah. We do it we sense life in us every single day. The difference is that we look at ourselves and say, I'm not capable of, I'm not strong enough, I'm not good enough. It's always about this characterization that we as human beings are frail and fail to do the things we do, when in reality, it's that we see the stuff that we feel is life itself. And so when we teach people to look at what they're sensing in themselves and understanding it through this lens of serving life, this radical purpose of serving life, and that they are in a sea of force. And that sea of force is causing that behavior and those reactions. And so it's about recognition of what's happening, not about altering what's happening. And the recognition allows me to alter, because then I'm empowered. Yeah. Right? I see force. I can call it out. I see you using force against me. I can call it out. I feel things. I can call them out as by nature, not as my weakness. Yeah. Or in you. If I see things in you that I can call out as your nature, and build up your awareness of who you are, then I'm empowering you and you're empowering me.
Well, it's fascinating what you're saying about recognition, because a lot of spiritual disciplines and backgrounds often saying awareness is enough. Awareness is enough for things to shift and change.
And I would say that what may have been missing from those traditions is the awareness of force as well. Because it's not just inside us. No. It's not just inside us. It's that interdependence and the awareness of the force. And so if I think it's just in me and force causes me to do something negative, then I can say, well, it's just in me and I'm guilty. I'm the bad person for having done what I did. When in reality, the interdependence of the environment, the context, created that impulse in me.
Yeah, I think there's a fascinating almost recipe for diagnosing the sickness of modern society in just that recognition, as it were.
Exactly.
I wanted to sort of lift it out of the deeper side and go somewhere slightly a bit more superficial, but it's just out of curiosity. So, and then we'll round off. But I'm kind of curious, because Radical has got a kind of ecosystem, and you've got an approach to organizations developing themselves in a way as much as building their organization. So how would you say, like, for example, a B Corp, I would say, has got a kind of noble purpose in there, or a reinvented organization working along wholeness, self-management, and evolutionary purpose would be aligned? What would you say, how would you distinguish your work from the work of those two systems, if you can say that briefly? I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot of groups, right? There's
Yeah.
the Simcoe group. There's a lot of groups that are doing this work, and it's work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
It's work that I think we all feel the sense of the sense of desire to do. The difference would be that I think that a radical transformation of the type that I'm describing is not about moving from one ideological stance of what an organization should be to another ideological stance of what an organization should be. An organization, in my book, is a tool for the people who make it up, not an institution that imposes on people. And that's the difference between what we describe. In order to really have an organization that is radical, it needs to be both co-owned and co-managed by the people in it. Not to simply be that the organization has a nicer view of the external world or a nicer view of the people inside. It's still force, because I, as a member of such an organization, am still subject to its force. Its, I still have to be the nice employee. Yes, they're nicer, right? I'm a B Corp. I'm treating the world nicer. I'm treating my employees nicer, but I still have all of the privileges and all of the rights of